Okay, that's it. Welcome everybody to the Develop Portal Strategy webinar. I'm Kristof from Tomme. I'm CEO of Pronovix, one of the co-founders of Pronovix, and now just over 10 years in the API developer portal community, a little bit longer in the documentation community. And today I want to talk about this apparent conflict that I've been wrestling with for quite a while. But I'll explain in a second. So I'll be talking about scanning, reasoning, and the semantic gap. There's three new concepts. Well, they're not new concepts, but they're newly important concepts in light of agentic or the agentic world that we're moving into. No matter how fast agentic interactions really will take off on the public side, so like we start seeing use of AI for agentic programming patterns inside of organizations. You see some people front-running the industry with things like OpenClaw and stuff like that. On the private side, B2B agentic interactions is still, I think that it's still very early days, but it really feels like there's like a new internet and a new paradigm for how we're going to be interacting with organizations that is on the horizon, and that will be landing soon. In anticipation of that, because it always takes a while until these things land, but in anticipation of that, there's a couple of things that you can do in your developer portal that will not only help you to get ready for those changes, that will also help you with AI search ranking and stuff like that. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. So, well, what is that apparent conflict I was talking about? So I got excited about documentation 14 or 15 years ago. I went to an unconference and I heard there about this magical documentation markup language called DITA. And there was, one of the organizers of that unconference, he was talking about how awesome minimalism was and how you could like create topics and then write like small chunks of documentation. Very, very fascinating stuff. And for a while I was like bringing that gospel into the Drupal community. Drupal is an open source content management system, and there I was talking with people about structured content, and Drupal is actually really well suited for that. And like the overlap between this documentation world, where there's this highly structured, meaningful semantic markup that is being used, and the Drupal world, where you can create highly typed content types and really well structured content types that you can then use to create different types of entities that you can manage in your content management system. But then along the way, while we started, I think the Write-a-Docs community we became member of, I think also just before we got into the API community. And the Write-a-Docs community was, they were talking about a very different thing, because they were talking about Docs code and Markdown. So there's these two schools, or at least two schools that I know about, or that are, from what I have seen, or in the circles that I move, are really important in the documentation world. So there's a school of minimalism, which is led by this DITA, Darwin Information Type Architecture, XML-based semantic markup language. And then there's the Docs Code School, which is led by this Markdown-based put your documentation in the code repository kind of methodology. So I got my first documentation love was DITA, and then but then there was this other thing with Markdown, and that was kind of cool, and people were very excited about that in the technical writer community. And then there was this apparent conflict between these two, because they're very, very different. In Dita, you're very deliberately writing minimalistic topics. You're trying to create. You'll have a professional who is specialized in writing documentation, who's creating these topics. And the core idea is that every topic that you write should only answer one question, and then you can like combine them and recombine them, and then translate them. This is why it's very very well used in like manufacturing and in areas where there's a lot of translation of documentation or recombining of different documentations. Like if you have a big machine that has certain components that are being reused between different machine models, then you can just write the topic once and then reuse it across different documentation manuals. So that's where that is like really strong. But then there's the markdown stuff where that like really strong in the technical writing for software community. So for a very long time, I was just like, yeah, very cool stuff, more cool stuff. Yeah, okay. So apparently there's different reasons to use different styles for different purposes. Probably in software, the minimalism and detail will be less important. And this is where that's kind of introduction that I want to start with. For people that are new, and I'll talk more about it after this first short introduction. So for people that are new to Pronovix, we're a consultancy specialized in developer portals. We have an open source developer portal built on top of Drupal CMS that can help you to create a content management system-based developer portal. But we also do consulting that is technology agnostic. So if you have if you're building something in-house with your own stack, we can help you with UX consulting, architecture, and things like that, or technical writing even. As I already said, like we're 15 years approximately in documentation. Like a long time ago, we tried to build an open source Dita CMS. That did not continue. But in the last 10 years, we've been specializing in API developer portals, and that's where we've been working. That's where most of our growth as a company started, and where we've been working with large enterprise companies from around the world. Now, where this story really started, where this resolution of the conflict, of the apparent conflict started, was when people started asking me like, Kristof, what's going to happen to developer portals? Because, you know, we're looking at AI, like now, New York API Days, the conference where I'll be next week presenting. I think their tagline is, agents don't read developer, or part of their description is agents don't read developer portals, which is not really true. But that was, there's this question hanging in the air. It's like, what is going to happen? Is it still going to be developers that are doing the developing, or is it going to be AI that will be doing the reading of documentation, maybe using MCP in your IDE to like pull in documentation straight from the source, and maybe you don't need to read the portal anymore. What is it still going to be called a developer portal, or is it going to be called something else? There's all of these questions that have been hanging in the air, where even like what kind of interface patterns will be there in the future. So right now, the dominant pattern, I would say, is REST-based API interactions, although there's still a lot of XML out there, and there's a bunch of other standards and async. Well, no, okay, maybe I'm not sure actually if REST is still the dominant one, but it is. In the API product world, it has been the standards that really was on the top of the wave. But now there's all this talk about MCP, And what that enables, there's like agentic protocols. Those are also different. There's some of this is happening over traditional APIs, also including REST APIs. But there's a whole lot of uncertainty and questions about, okay, what is it now actually that we should be doing? I've seen other vendors in the space like diving headfirst into like, we have a portal for MCP or stuff like that. And yeah, and while we've been looking at this, we've been thinking like, is this really the smartest thing to really invest in right now, or what it would be a better place to invest? So then we've been thinking about going back to basics and thinking about the purpose of the portal and what it is being used for. And I'll talk a little bit to that. And yeah, but it basically, I've had people come to me and ask like, to Kristof, what should we do with our portal now with AI? How should it evolve? And of course you can publish MCP endpoints, like you can publish the existence of MCP servers also on the developer portal. You can explain what it does and so on. So it does not have to be separate. Well, but I've also heard people say maybe we just need an MCP registry and everything is going to be MCP. I don't think so. But yeah, that's kind of like the situation today. That triggered this. So I'd like to introduce three patterns of ways to look at what the function is of your developer portal. So first pattern is to build portals for a very specific technology. And this is what has happened for a lot of organizations because they built a developer portal as part of their API management solution. So like if you're using Apogee or Kong or one of the other gateways, there's a very high chance that you have a REST API developer portal that was built specifically for that. Now, some of them have been branching out into some of these other patterns. Some of them are doing async APIs also for like asynchronous connections, and sometimes this becomes like a data portal. But typically, what you see is that the clean-cut, cookie-cutter products are following the product category boundaries. So you have like a REST API portal, you've got this API portal, you got and so on and so on. You have an internal developer portal that connects to Kubernetes, etc., etc., etc. So this is the pattern that often is like when you're following your technology vendor. Often this is where organizations end up with that they buy into a SaaS solution for managing a certain type of interfaces, and then a certain type of portal comes with that. Well, now in the past, that meant that you ended up with like this fragmented landscape of lots and lots of little portals. Now, looking to the future, if we're thinking about how does AI change this landscape, then it is this very like what I was talking about earlier, this who even knows what this all will look like next year, or maybe even next month sometimes. So there's this AI is like this big wave, and yes, you can try to surf it, but I don't know if you've watched videos of tsunamis. They don't look like real waves. They're just this inexorable water deluge that just keeps coming and coming and coming, and that it's really hard to stay on top of. So I think that following specific technology patterns to help to address these changes that are coming because of AI, I don't think is the way forward, or not the best way forward. Second pattern is the portal for specific personas, like a portal for a partner manager, or a portal for an internal developer, and so on and so on and so on. So again, here there's some products, like there's an internal developer portal products like Backstage, for example, that are that are very popular in the Kubernetes and CNCF communities. Um, um, and those, but again, you have similar issues as like, how many portals are you going to build? And then that question, will you still need a developer portal, or will it be an AI portal, or whatever? Or how will this evolve? And there's yeah, again, questions around this. And yes, you can, if you have a clear idea about some of these personas, and if you're a large enough company, this might be useful to have a dedicated, and I'll do question answers at the end, if that's okay. So you can do dedicated portals for specific personas. But again, is that the most valuable thing to do? And how many portals would you need to build? And will you create a portal for every persona? And like we did couple of webinars ago, I did a webinar about the 9 types of developer portals that you might want to build. And that talks a little bit against that topic. Like, so the different types of purposes that you could build a portal for, like a partner portal, or an internal portal, a catalog, a registry, and so on and so on, depending on the very specific purpose that you want to address. Now, the third pattern, and I think this is the pattern where there's the most value, is to look at your portal as a change management tool that helps to guide your community through some transformation that is going on. That could be like moving from badly documented information to like a Doxus code flow, with everybody following a similar standard process for doing documentation, and certain governance around what documentation is required, and how you're going to evaluate that it is there and sufficient. Or a change management tool for an acquisition, or for dealing with acquisitions, or change management for the launch of a certain product, or a certain partner program, or things like that, where you're not only looking at like purely a persona, but you're looking at a very specific important business value for your organization that you're going to execute against with your partner program, and then combine different tooling to help you to execute against that. And that could be combining different technologies, combining different personas, but where you're really looking at like, okay, you know, what is going to make the executives excited about this program that we're running. And then a portal can be a catalyst for your transformation, where you know, you can give a face to your community, give a place that people can go to find information. You could have like a micro portal around a certain product. Like if you have a certain product or service that you're launching as an organization that has strategic value, then you could create a micro portal around that to really drive adoption of your APIs, so that you get better locking of customers and more loyalty, and et cetera, et cetera. And the thing with this is that change by nature is contextual. It is always dependent on your organization. Who are you today? How large are you? How many departments do you have? What departments are digital natives? What departments are digital laggards? Do they need to be part of this change or not? All of those questions, the politics you'll have to navigate, and so on, will have an impact on how you structure that portal, and the system that you need to enable your community to you know, to grow and to thrive. But there's 2 global change contexts happening today that are still contextual. I'm a strong believer in complexity. If you go back a couple of years, we have some We had a conference around complexity, and a fascinating topic. Practically, I do believe that reality is this hyper object that you can't just reduce it to like an easy cookie cutter, this is the box that you fit in and it's always going to work. I don't believe in that. But there are two broad strategies, two major transformations that are happening on a global scale that create the need for like a larger subtype of change management systems that that organizations probably want to have. The first one is this adapting to faster flow of software change and alignment with software teams, because what you typically see is that software teams today are under a lot of pressure to deliver faster and faster and faster, and that means that documentation often is like an afterthought, or it takes a while until the documentation is updated. Software sometimes happens in silos, and then making sure that you can facilitate flow for software teams so that they can move rapidly, but also that documentation stays aligned and in sync with what is happening in software. That is like a major wave pattern, I would say, that has been going on for quite a while, and that was triggered with by like the agile movement and ideas around velocity and software development practices, and that wave is ongoing. And that wave, DOCSIS code is definitely a big winner, because DOCSIS code allows you to shift from a pattern where you have like the developers that are doing their thing, and then there's the documentarians that are doing their thing, to kind of like merge these two together, where the role of a documentarian becomes more of an editor rather than the one who's always trying to catch up with what's going on in reality. And DOCSIS code allows you to do that by making the responsibility of the developer to keep documentation in sync with the code that you're writing. The other major wave that got triggered with that fateful launch of ChatGPT, when the whole world was like, uh-oh, like, here we go again. Here's another AI wave coming, was this adaptation to this changing world, like the world changed by AI, and I call it the agentic world, but this transformation where more and more, no matter if you really like AI or if you're very heavily against AI, the cat is out of the bag. The world is underway of being transformed. I think the best parallel probably is like when, like in 2000, when the World Wide Web really came onto the front scene. This change is happening, and organizations will have to change as a result. Like web triggered a whole bunch of changes. It didn't go as fast as people thought in 2000, like when there was a 2000 crash and so on. But like if you look today, the world is unrecognizable compared to the world pre-internet. I don't know about you, but I buy a lot of the things that I buy online. And that's just one part of all of these changes. Banking has been transformed. We're all transformed because of the internet. Similarly, I think we will be transformed because of AI. There's, the usage of AI for yourself and how you do your job, and like how you reconfigure how organizations work to use AI. But also there's a much broader transformation that is underway, which is like the agentic software pattern and the agentic interaction pattern that is transforming how organizations communicate with each other. I don't know about you, but I'm getting daily messages that I like. They're super personal. They look highly targeted, you can still kind of guess that it's AI, where, yeah, probably not a good thing. But this kind of automated interactions, or like your customers asking AI to send you a message about a problem with your products. Maybe your customer saying like, hey, I've got this problem, I need it to be solved, do anything you need to do, and then something like OpenClaw might start emailing your CEO with the complaints, or start threatening with PR disasters and stuff like that. The world is changing fundamentally, and we need to adapt to that. But what does that mean for documentation? How does documentation need to change to adapt to AI? And there, I think there's some really interesting tidbits, and there is where we're coming to that scanning and reasoning bifurcation for documentation that was in the title for this webinar. Because what is changing exactly with AI? So first, the obvious, automated interactions. But automated interactions mean that you probably need to make your documentation public, so that an agent, without reaching out to a person, is able to get access to the availability of certain information. You probably need to have some way, and this is looking forward, and this will take some time, I think, but like setting up authentication sessions on the fly in a low trusted context. There's some really interesting problems here. There's also change in timescale and scope. Before, API interactions were kind of like, they had two timescales. There was the application creation timescale, where you would request access to an API, and then you would develop an app, or a developer would develop an app, request access for an API. You would know exactly what application that's, or you could kind of look at the interaction patterns for that application and see if they were doing something nefarious, because the context in which your API was being used was deterministic and defined and definitive. It was a closed application. Now, with AI, applications are open-ended and undefined and non-deterministic. Also, the timescale of the change of what kind of interactions people are trying to do with your APIs has gone from, we're going to spend some months or sometimes years developing an application, we're going to get it approved, and then we're going to bring it into production. That has moved to like, I need something today, like Claude, build it for me, or or OpenClaw, just generate me something, and then it starts trying your APIs to see what it can do with it. So there's a shift in timescale and scope. Like the scope has become undefined from a defined and finite scope. We're now going to an open-ended and potentially infinite scope, where you don't know what is going to be done with your API once you give access to it. Another really big one is that all of this is grounded not in reality, it's grounded in digital reality. And digital reality is not the same as our reality. There's this concept of a digital twin, and a lot of organizations, factories, this big trend in German tech writer world, have been working on digital twins for their factories, where they're trying to create a model that in real time is in the same state as their organization, so that you get a digital copy of the factory reality that is happening. This is a lot of work, and it's actually hard to keep that in sync with your factory, or you have to do a lot of measurements and sensors and a bunch of things. But if you're trying to make a digital twin of real reality, like where birds are flying and people are doing all kinds of random stuff, because it's not their job to follow your rules, this gets really, really messy. And and AI is not, it does not have sensor. Well, it has some sensors, maybe too many sensors, but AI does not have real-time access to traffic cameras, for example. So it doesn't know what is actually going on the road. It has some copy of reality that might be more or less in sync with what is actually going on out there. So AI has, I think there was a talk that the former CEO and one of the founders of MuleSoft did on a fireside chat with Mehdi Medjawin as one of the keynotes in Amsterdam at the API Days conference, where they were talking, where he's talking about AI having infinite knowledge, but like no context, where it is the context that humans bring. So the knowledge is there. Well, you could argue with some of that, if all of that knowledge is truly truly dependable. But it's hard to argue against this idea that AI through web search has like unprecedented access to knowledge. It provides a different way of interacting with knowledge that's out there than we've ever had before. So AI, clearly has a huge advantage there, but then you have to bring the context to it, and that was a really interesting thought. But I want to complement that with, you also have to bring the logic of your organization to it. So the AI models that are being trained by the frontier model organizations like Google Gemini and OpenAI and all the others, they can have access to hopefully objective knowledge about the world, although probably that's not true because it's trained on the reality of the internet. And the reality of the internet is not always rational or actually grounded in truth. So that there's some caveats there. But besides that, you need to bring context and your organization's logic, because even if the AI models are talking about reasoning, basically they're not truly reasoning. There's no logic. There's no real logic, or I'm sure the models are evolving very fast, and maybe some of the logic is being built in, but your organization's logic about your domain language, how your organization is structured, what your products are, how those products are interacting, what products you should not combine, what are prerequisites in your organization, and so on and so on and so on. This kind of knowledge graph, you have to bring that yourself. So so with all of these changes, it's kind of like these are the changes that I see that AI is triggering. They bring a couple of interesting problems that you probably need to start thinking about and addressing. So one is authentication hurdles, making sure your documentation is up to date, like maybe thinking about Doxis codes to make sure that there's a sync between your developer teams and whatever you're publishing and sharing inside of your organization or to the outside world. Implicit to explicit minimalism. This is about, like I was talking earlier, well, if you're interested in this stuff, if you're interested in data and minimalism, I've done 3 podcasts, one with Paul Quano from formerly Ansys, now Synopsys. He's super smart, very structured mind, very good teacher. We had a long conversation, and I took the liberty of asking him to explain data and how it all works. So if you're new to data and you want to learn more, go and listen to that talk. Paul is amazing, and he explains it really, really well. I also had an interview with 2 Sandeep and I forgot the second name. I should have looked it up. 2 gentlemen from Cisco, that were presenting at DITA Europe conference, and they talked, and that was also a DITA conversation, but it was focusing on knowledge graphs and what they're doing in building explicit minimalistic content. And I'll explain in a moment what I mean with this distinction. But what they're trying to do is to create a body of documentation that is able to configure their software product that they're selling to their customers, to configure it for the customer purely using AI, so that there's no human needed to be able to configure their software product. Very, very fascinating story. And that was the second interview. There's a third interview that's not published yet with Dawn Stevens. She's the CEO or chairwoman. She's the leader of CIDM, which is a consultancy specialized in doing DITA projects. And they're also organized the DITA Europe and DITA US conferences. And she was talking about minimalism changing in nature. In the past, minimalism used to be about two things. It used to be about creating a slice of content, like I earlier alluded to it, that you should only answer one question. But minimalism was also about writing for your audience, knowing what is the persona that you're writing for, and what is the background knowledge that they already have that you can leave out of your documentation. Now what she was saying is that with AI, you cannot make these assumptions. You have to be explicit. You have to explicitly describe a narrow slice of context, like for one question, but like the full question explained as if you're talking to, a baby that doesn't understand. Or you have to like link other topics in so that you can be explicit about the knowledge that you're sharing with AI, because otherwise it will make assumptions and it might be hallucinating. And that was very, very fascinating shift also in how documentation is done. So that's the difference between implicit minimalism, where you're relying on assumptions about your persona because humans, they can deal with it, hopefully, or they come with a lot of baggage and a lot of things that they already know. And explicit minimalism, this is something I invented these names. So, but if you're interested in that topic, we'll have the interview with Dawn Stevens published a little bit later. I also talk a little bit about it with Paul and I think also with Paul. And this brings us to this context slicing, which is thinking about your documentation. So if you want to enable AI to reason, you need to create slim context slices so that you can feed AI just enough context so that it can act predictably and in a better way. Now, another problem that this brings, so we had this explicit versus implicit context and minimalism and context slicing. The other interesting thing is semantic gaps, because I was talking a little bit about it earlier, that AI lives in the digital world, in the digital representation of the world. And we all know that there's huge gaps between actual reality and whatever is online available, or even available in written word. There's a whole bunch of things that are not documented in the world. And there's, and if you start, we started analyzing like what are the different types of semantic gaps, and there's a lot of them, like gaps between your business strategy and your products, gaps between your documentation and the products that you actually have, gaps between the technical documentation and your business documentation. So all of these gaps contribute to confusion because AI cannot see what is actually there. AI is making assumptions based on what it can read and what it can perceive online. And that this brings me to this saying from George Box. That is something I learned from Mark Bergauer when we were doing the complexity series. The saying that how is it? All models are wrong. Some of them are useful. So whatever we are creating using language, the documentation that we are creating are models of the real world. And sometimes those models can be useful, but all of them are lacking somewhere. And there's always going to be gaps. No matter, even if you spend a lot of time documenting everything, there will be some assumptions you're making or some small things that creep in. It's impossible. I'll never say never, but I think it's nearly impossible to perfectly, no, it is impossible to perfectly document how your organization is working. Your teams are doing things that your organization doesn't even realize that they're doing. Mark Bergauer was talking about earlier. He used to do consulting for organizations where they would have like a really successful team, and they were like, oh, this is this agile team, they're doing amazing. We're going to split them in two, and now we're going to have two agile teams. Split it in two, and the whole thing breaks down. And then because there were certain practices that this team was doing, that they were not even aware of that they were doing. So there's this, implicit knowledge that we might, as humans, not even be aware that we're doing together as a shared practice between different people, or in the context of your organization. And whatever you're going to be doing with documentation is just going to be a model of that reality. So this brings us to those two, and then I'm almost going to wrap it up here and then open up for a couple of questions. This brings us to these two new roles that I start seeing at the horizon for documentation that you might want to start preparing for. So one is reasoning, which is creating a minimalist, or creating a body of knowledge, a knowledge kernel, semantic knowledge kernel, that is probably ideally using the semantic slices, or using this context slices, not semantic slices, using these context slices that are using minimalism to create explicitly declared structured information, bodies of information that will help AIs to actually reason using proper logic, using semantic markup, to understand, like, what kind of topic is this? Is this a thing? What kind of properties are these? What are all the properties that this thing can have, and so on and so on. So that you can construct a knowledge graph that then can be used, that can be traversed by an AI that is trying to act inside of your organization without messing things up. So this is the first one, the reasoning. For reasoning, you want to use semantically meaningful markup. There, you want something like data that is, or highly structured content, like content types in Drupal, where you're clearly declaring what is what, because that helps to create information that does not have to be interpreted to be acted upon, which is going to massively improve the productivity and the usefulness of the AI capability, or the AI functions that you're trying to act out. The second one is scanning, which is other people's AI is already today scanning your websites to try to figure out if your organization is fulfilling certain services, or if it has certain products that they might want to buy. I don't know about you, but I'm heavily using AI for purely like learning about stuff, like, should I already plant out pumpkins right now, or should I wait a little bit longer? What kind of soil requirements do these things have? What should I be doing with it? And this is just for my hobbies, but then also in professional life, what is, I'm going to have this conversation with this company. What is their business? Who are they competing with? How can I best help them strategically? What might they be looking for? All of this kind of stuff. And your customers are definitely doing this, asking AI, like, okay, explain me what is that I'm looking for this kind of product. What are the competitors? What should I be thinking about? What I should be paying attention to? Which of these companies can actually provide this to me? And there's success stories of organizations that had really, really good generative engine optimization and ended up being like the first answer coming out of queries like that, and seeing their business quadruple or crazy things like that. So making sure that your content, that you have complete documentation that can easily be scanned, is going to become more and more important for your organization on a strategic level. So this is where we have this practice around solutions and capabilities. I won't go too much in detail about that, but if you're interested in that, if you're interested in maybe exploring how your developer portal could also be a solution portal that can help with either your colleagues or your customers to scan your capabilities for the capability that they're looking for to start working on top of, and to scan for solutions that explain how capabilities can be combined to achieve certain outcomes, then have a chat, like reach out. If you're in the banking sector, right now we're doing a pilot in the banking sector. If you're not in banking, talk also to us. We can also do something in this sector around the solution stuff, but no, for information. In the scanning area, in this area of solutions and capabilities that you want to publish, token count matters. If you have a very, very fancy website, beautiful, amazing, people love it. It's interactive, it's great, it pops, but it's very, very heavy. And to be able to get to the content, AI needs to skim through a whole bunch of tokens and JavaScript and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That means that you're using up the token window that AI scrapers have for analyzing the information, to be able to see when it should be using it to answer customers, that they'll maybe only read part of your website, and they won't get to the end. Like how to address these kind of problems, or if you want us to have a look at your portal and to give you advice on things that you might want to change to improve AI visibility, also connect us. But in this area, low token markup, like in something like Markdown, can actually improve the visibility of your content. So that is like the scanning, reasoning, talked a bit about semantic gap, took you on a long arc across all of these topics. I'd love to hear your feedback, because it's the first time I'm doing this topic. Before I switch to questions, still want to repeat, if you're in the market for some help, a couple of things that we could do for you. We could talk with you about whatever transformation you're currently considering and how your portal could help with that, and what kind of portal you need for that transformation. We could help talking about how to migrate to Doxis code and how to publish with that, using Markdown flows and things like that. We can talk about how to agent-proof your business, maybe more on strategic level. We have the solution scan that we can look at your corporate websites and show maybe to your management, like, here's all the gaps. Like, these are all promises you're making, and there's no interfaces for that stuff. So if agents are going to try to execute on this, basically they bump into the wall. Like we have this AI perception model as part of our solution discovery framework. Long story. If you're interested in this, hit us up.